Well, thank you, sweetheart, for joining me in another intimate dialogue, as we call it. And I think we've had a hard time, and we're going to reflect on it. Uh, I was we had an event May 2nd. I'll ask you to say something about that in a minute. That has repercussions bad for you and me, and other exogenous events intervening that were almost as bad as the original, maybe worse than the original event. And this is still unfolding. We're in the middle of it right now. And praying beforehand, my guidance was to go into the heart of suffering. Hard to know exactly what that means, but uh, but maybe just start there. And we're talking about our own suffering. But I assume listeners who may or may not be interested in what Jerry and Abigail are going through their own challenges, right? Their own suffering. Everyone encounters these things, if not today, then tomorrow or in the future. And and it's important. One of the mysteries of the world is why all this horrible suffering. But anyway, here's our case study, you might say, our particular example or instance of suffering.
Yeah.
And it starts, oddly enough, when we're invited to speak at Princeton Theological Seminary, and minutes before the panel is to begin, uh, you step off what looks like flat ground, but is in fact a step down into hard concrete. And whammo, there goes the hip, the leg. That's you're put out of commission.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they race you off to Princeton Penn facility. A surgeon does his thing. It takes, and I guess it's a big thing because you're going to see the scar runs way down, because it's not just like a little hip module as I had first envisioned such a thing, but there's a whole broken bone, and the whole thing has to be opened up, and
Yeah.
some metal or silicone or whatever device put in.
Titanium, whatever.
Titanium, that sounds really
Yeah.
super duper, that you're going to be able to run up mountains with titanium. But no, it doesn't quite work that way. It just slowly heals as a usable piece of equipment of your bodily equipment.
Yeah.
Uh, but uh, and I don't know if you want to say something about that, sweetheart. I mean, the suffering of that is obvious. Uh, the pain, the ordeal, the hospitalization. But there was a whole second event
Yeah.
where, if had we not at the last minute, you might say, call 911 because we'd gotten some medical advice that put us in the wrong direction, but your blood pressure suddenly dropped to 60 over 40, which is the lowest blood pressure I've ever heard of. And we called 911. And had we not made that and they came instantly, you would be dead now. We wouldn't be able to have this discussion.
Yeah.
And as it felt to me, my life would have been over, in meaningful terms. But yours would have been over on this planet in literal terms.
Yeah.
And that was another ordeal, leading to procedure. They had to put in 3 pints of blood. Uh, uh, and you have every day, this is how the unfolding goes on. You have physical therapy at home, 3 different people who are coming around each week and making you do all kinds of strenuous things that your body was not up to doing. And yet here you press it as much as you can, and with never a day off, because as you and I were saying this morning, you can't take a day off because then you slide back. So you've got to keep pushing, pushing, pushing.
Yeah.
And if you go into the heart of that suffering, sweetheart, what do you find there?
Well, it was odd, the whole experience, especially at first, the repairing of the hip fracture, partial fracture. What I did was contract mentally, retract so that I would coincide with the event. I didn't decide to do this. This wasn't Zen in the art of hip fracture. I just seemed to have automatically pulled in so that I had no intentionality larger than my body's um, being as a kind of thing. I just stayed inside of it and maintained probably the most impoverished inner life I've had since I ever had inner life. I had no life additional to being conscious of to the life that accompanies consciousness of one's body. I should imagine that an animal's inner life is the consciousness of its body, and that's how mine went. And I didn't know or particularly strive in to transcend the fact that this might be the end of my life. I had practically zero transcendence. The um, consciousness of one's consciousness was wholly minimal. There came a second point farther down the road of this experience where, once we were home and then suddenly in a life-threatening um, um, interlude, uh, where, I could feel my body from feet up the legs, up the middle section, up the chest, marching toward the um, head or heart, uh, suddenly very cold, trembling, and I knew that this was danger. And I think I said, together with whoever, you and the nice person who was happening to be there, this, we need to call 911. This is beyond what my body can recover from. This is not a normal um, reaction to something where you bounce back.
No,
This,
rather sounded like death moving up your body
yeah,
to the
yeah,
most vital organ, to the
yeah.
final
It,
conquest by
it,
death over life. That's
yeah,
what it sounded like
it was,
with your shivers and everything.
yeah, it was intolerably dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, and I knew that nice crew from the ambulance
Hmm.
was good for a situation like this,
Yeah.
as long distance medical advisors were absolutely not. You know,
Yeah.
all they knew was what they wanted to know, not what was fact. The ambulance crew deals with facts, and it's sort of like calling in somebody to rescue you when you're drowning. They don't have a theory. They need to get the water out of your lungs and get you out of the pool or the ocean. So the ambulance crew was really what stood between me and death. Um, and in the course of going to whatever kind of urgent care in the hospital um, was mandated, where several times, at least twice, there had to be um, an operation to repair what the medical, if I were in the law business, malpractice or mistakes for which no one took responsibility, which is tragic because it tells me, and I know this from a friend who lost her father to this kind of miscommunication. He died because it wasn't told to the people on scene what medication he absolutely needed. Anyway, um, several interventions to repair the tears in my body that had been the consequence of these miscommunications. Uh, at a somewhat down the road point from that, I had a sense um, of the happiness that's part of my life with you, Jerry, that ordinary life put screens me from because um, it's sort of a deep level reaction, and deep level reactions comport vulnerability. And for the purposes of ordinary life, I had clicked out that degree of self sensibility. So,
Explain that a little more. What was the self-sensibility that was pushed out?
um, when we first fell in love, it ushered me into a larger space um, than I had inhabited as a person who was not in love. It opened up a kind of skylight um, that had closed off a piece of sky. Uh, and when we first fell in love, I went up past the skylight and was intensely happier and intensely aware of the vulnerability of that. And so once I adjusted to this new condition, and it made it obvious that we need to remake our lives, that it wasn't sufficient to commute, it wasn't sufficient to be apart.
You were living in New York. We both had full-time jobs. You in New York, me in Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
We didn't, a lot of people have these little commuting
yeah.
arrangements.
And I was advised by my academic colleagues to do that, to have a commuting marriage so that I wouldn't be giving up life in Manhattan and a good job and, very desirable circumstances. But the falling in love trajectory had an absoluteness to it that precluded those kinds of convenient compromises with the absoluteness of love. And of course, you don't give up a job people would kill for,
Yeah.
um, and an apartment, people would kill for. Um, but it seemed as if there was um, a demandingness about the experience we had. It ushered me into a new frame of mind, a new frame around the life that the two of us would have, different from what you acknowledge in a commuting marriage, where the framework remains what it was before. So,
The whole experience was somewhat overwhelming for each of us in our different ways, but we shared that with each other, that it was as though we didn't have enough, I think we used the word conduits or something in our bodies to absorb this phenomenon.
mhm.
And so that overwhelming feature has been I suppose, been in the background ever since. It's rather a dominant feature of the gestalt of our lives since
Yeah.
that time on.
And, what happened to you subsequently, or me, in terms of our work lives, was a kind of flowering or tremendous expansion. You had your God experience once these um, ceilings were opened up.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was, the exact cause and effect, the exact sequence uh, that led thither. You've described both in your God and autobiography book and in the more recent um book, uh, but radically personal. In my case, uh, my first book, A Good Look at Evil, um, gained two more chapters and a new edition, and both of those additional chapters with a new publisher um, involved would not have been possible if that skylight hadn't opened. Uh, there was simply a new birth of insights uh, or a new admission of insights into my reality that um, was possible with the skylight open and not possible prior to that. Uh, Likewise, the um, drive to publish Confessions of a Young Philosopher, which had a prior edition, but this time to publish it adequately, to illustrate it, to get it illustrated, to get it um, in the right frame. Um, all were shakeouts from the new space and time around us.
Now, how did these medical events, the breaking of a leg and a hip, and you were, it turns out you were losing all this blood and it's got a big hole in your stomach, what they call a bleeding ulcer, but it's a big hole that they had to kind of cauterize and sort of try to close.
Yeah.
And first effort only succeeded halfway. They had to go back and do it again. Because
Mhm.
they kept having to add blood to you. Otherwise, you would have expired. It takes a lot of blood to keep bodies going. And fortunately, they can do that, add
Mhm.
blood. But how did all of those events intersect with the story you're just telling about this tremendous impact
Yeah.
that our falling in love had on us as personalities, on our thinking, our life horizons?
I I had what I know, and I'm not sure I know all there is to know about this, not at all sure. What I know, what I believe I learned was that I had been repositioning the skylight to some degree so that I would live, quotes, normally, not in the presence of this ecstatic grace and this, which comported vulnerability as I assessed it, rather unconsciously. I didn't decide, let's shutter this experience. That would have been stupid. I'm not consciously stupid, I'm unconsciously stupid. So unconsciously, I I closed to some degree this skylight so as to live more normally, as I thought, and probably lived in a less, with less openness to the transcendent for daily purposes, without being conscious of having made such an unconscious decision in the crisis of not near death in the sense now being popularized, where people go to the other world and meet their departed loved ones, but near empirical death, near, the body dies and consciousness goes wherever it can after that. But, that kind of death, I couldn't be screened from ultimate things. And so one of the features of the experience was that I became once again conscious of the sort of open skylight happiness of being with the guy I loved most in the world.
Mhm.
You know, the drama of that, the excitement of that, the quickening of that, the consolation and comfort of that, and of course, something that I hadn't wanted to deal with, the risk of that. One or the other of us can die and leave the other one. And it seems too risky, um, in the classic, medieval tales of le coup de foudre, the stroke of lightning. The lovers don't last, they die.
Uh-huh.
Romeo and Juliet die. Tristan and Isolde die. Dante and Beatrice, when he finally meets her in his vision, she reproaches him for not being dead yet so that they can be together in a proper manner. So there is something in the literary acknowledgement which seems medieval, since all the examples I'm talking about are quasi-medieval or a little bit after medieval. The world doesn't hold that. The lovers are set to die, and we have, we're Americans. We're not
Right,
medieval
right. We're not
people. We
medievals.
no,
We don't
we're
want
not.
to die.
We're not trying to ascend. We're trying to live in a practical manner,
Uh-huh.
be more normal, and cope with life. And there's something. It's as if I remember many, many years ago on the Rue de Tournon, there was a cafe a little downbeat from the Tournon, which was more upscale, chez Maurice. And there were some Russians talking there. And my friend Marie understood their Russian talk, And I said to Marie, what are they saying? And she said, you really want to know? Well, yeah. What are they saying? They're speaking so soulfully. And it seems one was saying, what is love? And maybe he answered his own question. He answered it. To love is to suffer. And I thought, well, yeah, and it doesn't, I don't know if to love is to suffer. To love is to undergo, which in the technical sense is to suffer love. What frightened me was to love is to open the soul and therefore to open it to a wider expanse of suffering. The the opened soul, we speak of open soul, that maybe William James, you know more about that than I do right now. Um, but the opened up soul is opened up to what we most fear, which is suffering, loss.
One would think from what you just said, sweetheart, that this trauma of the events you've been through, near death, including near death, would make you pull back more. I mean, that would bring right up front the vulnerability of suffering. I know I've told friends that before I found my true love, uh, I knew how to live life. I was doing fine, you might say. It was kind of black and white rather than technicolor, but that's fine. You're making my way. And I was aware immediately, I now have a new vulnerability. It would now be very hard. Just once you get color TV, it's hard to go back to the black and white. It'd be very hard for me to go back. In fact, it would be harder than that little analogy I produced because it would be as if uh, all the color from life, all the meaning was just drained, would just be drained. Uh, and I just knew that's now a possibility.
Yeah.
And you would think, from what you were just saying, sweetheart, that given how it was overwhelming and you already halfway shuttered the skylights because this is too much sun and too much vulnerability, is what
Yeah.
that meant. Uh, that now with this increased dangerous events, more dramatic and sharply painful events make you want to close it off entirely and just kind of withdraw. But it did not have that effect.
No, I'm not that stupid. I'm a philosopher. I'm a philosopher. I love wisdom. So I
Okay.
understood I'm learning something. This is the teaching, very unwelcome. The whole, the whole schmear, the whole broken windows of my life, the whole jaggedness of it, the whole, as the French used to say, or whoever says that, absurd, l'absurde, c'est absurde. Oh God, the apparent meaninglessness of it. Who trips on a veranda and breaks bones and who dies from medical mismanagement of one's case? Talk about how you might want to die firing squad. Some dictatorship says, swear allegiance to the dictator, and you say, give me liberty or give me death. And they say, rat-tat-tat, we have death for you. And that's meaningful. But to die meaninglessly because of these idiot, unprofessional, unloving, uncaring um, uh, uh, people who are punching out their uh, present from 9 to 5 cards and not thinking, hey, there's a human being, there's a brother in need, there's a soul that depends on you, Buster, and and shouldn't depend on you because you're not good for it. So that's why I'm supposed to die. So the whole thing, absurd in the worst way, trivially absurd, accidentally absurd, is bringing me up against life at an end. And so I can't kid around. Whatever is ending or whatever's threatened, I can't afford a two-tiered life. The whole mess of my life comes into play. This is what is being absurdly threatened. This is what is under the gun of medical idiocy, medical irresponsibility. And so but not being, as I sometimes say, as stupid as I look, not being stupid, I see, oh, what was being threatened with an absurd, unhappy, accidental ending is intensely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Is happiness itself. It's not that you and I are daily ecstatic on a normal day or on these abnormal days. It's not that. It's that we're open wide enough to be fully with each other, with our lives, with ourselves, with what comes from above, with what, nags from below or from one side or the other. But we're much more open. We're much more present. Love is permission to live as fully here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the permission. Uh, and I don't know about that Russian guy. To love is to suffer, but in the technical sense of to admit, to undergo, he's right. To love is to suffer love.
Yeah. A lot of my experience, other than the intense, the yikes feeling that my wife is mortal after all, and one knows it, but I felt ever since we hit our 80s and are still hyperactive professionally. I can barely believe it. But I felt a bit as if we were like the cartoon characters who run off the edge of the cliff and they keep going, until they look down and then yikes, then they fall to the ground. And so I feel as if I've been going along not looking down. And an event like this forces one to look down, and there may be some wisdom in not living the peddling the air life, trying to sort of levitate. But,
Yeah.
and you often say we need to get our wills in order and we already have a tombstone. So, one has to pay attention, of course, also to the medical details of life and one's exercise and what one's eating and, all of these things and get the bills paid and those are all fine. They're, in a way, the trivia of life, except they're the trivia of life that sustains everything one most cares about in life. And the other main experience I had, sweetheart, uh, was the joy of helping you. That we go through this together. I admired how you handled everything, so it was an exhibition, you might say, in a lot of the virtues of Abigail. Your persistence, you're taking the PT so seriously, you're doing everything they tell you, even from the beginning, you're in inner vitality. Uh, David, my son, was up here helping us, and he found it just remarkable that okay, what are we going to do next? Okay, and your lack of, I don't know, oh, we poor me, which I think would be very prominent if it had happened to me, my reaction. But you do not have, you certainly let people know, yikes, I don't like this. But you don't have that kind of, I don't know, victimhood mentality or something. Uh, but also, I just got to be of concrete help in all these different ways. And people, when they even share the stories of their suffering with friends, they think, oh, I shouldn't burden you with this. But that is not a burden. That enables friends to be friends. That enables lovers to be lovers. And this is one's chance to enact the love. Love isn't just a pitter patter. I'm always saying this. Love is an action verb. You love somebody, you want to enact it. And then you enact it in a whole life, of course, but you also enact it in these concrete ways, in part by date nights and Valentine's dinner and so forth, but also just concretely and managing the challenges of life. And certainly in a medical crisis, which this was, it gives me, as your lover, the chance to enact that love in very concrete, you might say, life-sustaining ways, because you need that kind of help when you're in trouble. And this gives me the opportunity to give it. And I think that would apply to a lesser degree, of course, to friends as well. Friends you, and neighbors, if the neighbor needs me to bring them soup because they're sick, well, that lets me do something helpful to someone, and that's an opportunity. It's a little bit of a burden, but it's also a very nice opportunity. So anyway, to relate, that's people connect, people need relationship. And relationships is not all high love. That's one and kind of an ultimate sort of relationship to find your true love and fall in love. But there are these other wonderful connections. We have people who help us in wonderful ways, and which we very much appreciate.
I was, while you were talking, an odd thought came into my mind, marched randomly into my mind. I was thinking, uh, at the end of the play, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, uh, somebody, I forget who, says never was story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. Accidentally, um, they're feigning, she feigns death in order to be secreted away from those who keep her from her true love. He thinks she's dead, and so he actually kills himself, and then she kills herself. I hope I've got the
That
sequence.
sounds right. And she kind of comes out of it and then sees, oh my gosh, he's killed himself, and then
Yeah,
she does it.
yeah.
So it is a tragic tale of woe.
It's pretty woeful, but for the first time, it occurred to me as you were describing the um, consolations of helping me that were visiting you, that it was consoling to you to be able to do that. I thought of this, um, fabled pair, and for the first time, I thought, oh, what's sad is not just that they died while they were young and pretty, um, but they couldn't help each other. They really had to deal with the family conflict, each one to explain to the other the unreconciled clan, which hated anybody from the rival clan, that they loved each other. they would either be disowned and have to find some kind of a terrible job to survive, or they might, over time, effect a reconciliation uh, or some uh, fractional um, version of both. Uh, and they lost the opportunity to live through life's difficulties together, life's
Yes.
uh, half solutions, life's fractional uh, uh, finales that are not storybook but are organic, the politics of experience. That's what belongs to a couple, and they were robbed of the politics of their love, which
Yeah.
was something that had to be that demanded um, efforts at resolution. Dante and Beatrice didn't live the politics of their love, whatever
Mm.
that would have involved. The church didn't allow divorce. They were both married. Uh, Eloise and Abelard, well, they did live the politics of their love, and it was uh, tragic, but they lived it through and they still loved. So they are an exception to this cast of characters. Sometimes people live that badly or in the mode of betrayal, where, as I think Arendt and Heidegger lived the politics of their love badly. And in her case, in the mode of betrayal, I've argued that. Um, but in so what you were reminding me of was that the hardships, the chores, the burden on you, as we are not spring chickens, um, the physical burden, the psychological burden, the fact that you have other enterprises with deadlines on them. Uh, and I have a weekly column at the very minimum, um, and a book to publicize at the max right now, and other projects to um, uh, go forward with. All those um, demands of life, which we were carrying together with the demand of my injuries, uh, that's there's something, kind of the kiss of reality in that.
Hmm.
It's a vindication. It's, oh, we could do this too. Well, that ain't bad.
Well, I'm going to remind you of something. Before any of these events, long before, when I had just met you in person, I fell in love with you on the phone. That story is told in God an Autobiography. But we then did get to meet in New York. I went up, we had dinner and so forth. And we went to the Metropolitan Museum, I guess, and had lunch. And the previous week, I'd come up and you had told me about your life. This occasion, you were asking about my life. And I shared with you the great defining difficult moment of my life was the death of my brother. That was the defining moment. He was an infant. I was about 4 years old. They were, I don't know how old he was, but they were measuring it in weeks. He was X weeks old, and an infant. And I won't tell the story now, but the outcome of the events of the death was that my mother was in such grief, and it went on and on year after year, that I was emotionally on my own. I was abandoned. And this caused distress that nobody recognized, but it manifested in behavior. And finally, when I was in fifth grade, she found out the source of this stress, had got it somewhat corrected. But anyway, when I told you that story and how it affected me so badly, what you asked was, and I thought this was so remarkable, my mind would have gone to this question. You asked, what did you learn from that experience that you wouldn't have learned any other way? And I won't probe that. That's a story we might talk about sometime. But I think it's a good question to put to any of these kinds of experiences. You go through a hip fracture and that ordeal. You go through blood loss, a near death moment in that case. I go through my first thing, oh my gosh, we all are vulnerable after all. We're going to have to look down. Yikes, there's the ground coming up fast. And yet I do notice chances to help and to enact love, to make it not just a oozy feeling, but to do it, to do it, and to be a true love to you. Uh, and notice traits in you that I came to appreciate more, like looking at the diamond, under facets of light, sides of light. You look at the diamond shows in different ways, and you look up close through one of those eye things, and it was like that. I had that opportunity to look up close again, certain facets of you that I are so admirable and beautiful. Uh, but anyway, that's a good question. I think uh, for all of these moments of suffering is, well, what did you learn from it? Because these are also moments of learning, but
Yeah.
moments of potential insight, moments of grounding in certain aspects of reality that
Mm.
maybe you weren't being grounded in so well before.
Yeah. Well, I sort of feel like I'm um, going out on a limb. Speaking of cliffs and limbs, uh, in the answer that comes to mind, but I feel that in a way, it sort of scares me to say this, uh, but I feel more in a God-dependent relation to my life. It's when you're a kid um, playing in Central Park, um, there are uh, there's a kind of metal um, thing to play on where you swing from one level to the next. And it's hard to do because to swing from one set of parallel bars to the next, you have to let go. And
Mhm.
that's scary. And I guess trapeze artists are are big on that. But
Key to trapeze artists, I was surprised when I learned this. They swing and the one swings and is thrown in the air and another catches her. It's often the woman being swung in the air and two
yeah,
guys at each end. And the guy catches her. She does not grab him at all. She just floats. And the person I was reading this in was saying, that's how you need to relate to God, where you're not grabbing God's hands, as it were,
yeah, yeah,
but you're just doing your best, floating
yeah,
through life as
yeah,
best you can. Uh, I'm sure there's the art to just being thrown in the air. And so, okay, we've got to have that art of being thrown in
yeah,
life. But then let God catch us however God catches us.
yeah. There's that's a very good image of this, you know, transformation, if that's not too large a word or too heavy-handed a word. Um, so almost sounds clinical or theological or some kind of logos of something. Uh, and as if there's a doctrine of what I'm talking about, but it's not a doctrine. Uh, I had more doctrines before when I was less theistic, less God oriented than I am now. I had, more bars to swing from. But it feels as if one of the um, questions that people mask from themselves, and the masking gets more strenuous as you get to a certain age, is what do we do if and what do we do when? Uh, and it seems to me that that question is more infused with the question's answer, which is God and us can work it out. We can work it out with God's help.
Hmm.
It's more, maybe there's a team player feeling about this more. There are people who long for God, who hope for a mystical experience, um, who um, pine for miracles or visitations when they come. I don't know that beyond adolescence, when I read about mysticism and great saints and stuff, um, this characterized me. I I tend to take it as it comes, my phases of atheism, my phases of God connection, my deeper or deepened God connection. I just feel it's like a relationship whose permanence you trust, even when there are phases of estrangement. So in this case, I'm not writing some theology about this, but there has been a shift uh, in the balance wheel of my life. And the shift has suggested to me, has induced me to feel less covert panic about the last crises, if and as they inevitably come. No, maybe not so panicky. Maybe that too involves a partnership, a sense of God not being absent.
Yeah. 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 I was thinking of what God told me before we had this discussion, go into the heart of suffering. And thought that was an interesting way God put it to me, go into the heart of suffering. And probably at the heart of suffering, that's where God is.
Mm.
Well, sweetheart, I've, as always, enjoyed talking to you and
Yes.
appreciate your joining me.
Appreciate your inviting me to join.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to God and Autobiography, the podcast. Subscribe for free today wherever you listen to your podcasts and hear a new episode every week. You can hear the complete dramatic adaptation of God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher by Jerry L. Martin by beginning with episode 1 of our podcast and listening through its conclusion with episode 44. You can read the original true story in the book from which this podcast is adapted, God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher, available now at Amazon.com and always at godandautobiography.com. Pick up your own copy today. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, please email us at questions@godandautobiography.com and experience the world from God's perspective, as it was told to a philosopher. This is Scott Langdon. I'll see you next time.